Hey, it's News from Heaven, and today we're asking the question, how do I know if I'm being selfish? Because isn't it like religiously, spiritually stuff, including on our channel, is always like, don't, be good, don't be selfish, you gotta be really good. Well, I mean, where's the line? Isn't it kind of blurry? And sometimes I want to do things for this sort of reason. Well, we're going to try to work through it because, and not from like a guilty standpoint, but this can be a very important tool in getting us into the state of mind that we would be chasing, which would be called like enlightenment or heaven is what Swedenborg would call it. So of course we want to go there, and we need to, figure out the steps from here to there. The first step is liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Leave comments, and what we're hoping to do, that will help the video get out into YouTube, and hopefully we can build a framework where we're shining light down into the minds of the people of the world, our own minds, anybody else who comes across it. And what hopefully it does is dispel some of the clouds in the mind, the stuff that gets us down. And for this episode, we're focusing a little bit on the cloud of self-doubt and guilt and shame around am I good or bad? Am I doing things for the right reasons? Which can get amplified if we're trying to do some kind of regenerative spiritual growth stuff. But am I progressing at all? There's a fascinating take here in Swedenborg's book, Divine Love and Wisdom. You can download the link in the description. You can go to Swedenborgian.com and download it. It's free, man. And we're going to begin at 426, so that's like a scroll to the bottom situation. That's almost the end of the book. Save the best for last here. When love is spiritual and heavenly, it is a love for our neighbor and for the Lord. While when it is limited to nature and our senses, it is a love for the world and for ourselves. Well, you all knew that already. So there's a lot of Swedenborgian terminology in here. Interesting. So spiritual, heavenly are the two things we're going for. I mean, these are the two, different renderings, but the essential sides of this state of mind called heaven. And interesting there. So then it's a love for our neighbor and for the Lord. But what are you talking about? Okay, you love God and you love the people that live close to you. While when it is limited to nature and our senses, it's a love for the world and for ourselves. So here we get set in opposition to loving the world and ourselves, the world being sensory gratification, wealth without use. And I don't think he's talking here about nature like, oh, don't go to Yosemite National Park. Don't go to the Swiss Alps. This is talking about the outermost level. Somehow that pulls it down. But we really got to know what is love for the neighbor? What is love for the Lord? And how does this tie in? Because this question, this thing we're trying to answer here, how do I know if I'm being selfish? Actually, there was a question a couple episodes ago. It was a panel show, and somebody wrote this question into us saying, like, I'm trying to do things, but how do I know if I'm doing it for the reasons of self versus the reasons of others? This is how we do it. Love for our neighbor means, what does it mean? A love for acts of service. So while acts of service would be related to people, it's not actually the people. It's loving, doing good things for people. And love for the Lord means a love for doing such acts, as already noted. And when I first read this, getting ready for this, I thought to myself, these are the exact same thing. A love for acts of service and a love for doing acts of service. What is the difference? So of course, I scrolled a mighty scroll up to 237, and in classic Swedenborg fashion, like he sort of is talking about that there, but it's not like he's laying it out step for step. I think to me, it seems like there's leaps that I could get to eventually that he's assuming we're making right away. What I got out of it, and I'm nobody who's good at anything, but what I got out of it is the love for acts of service is primarily we're arriving there by an intellectual route. That we put together the pieces of what we know about ethics and then realize, well, we should do what's good. Whereas a love for doing this, so there's an admiration for the act itself, and then we put it into practice. A love for doing is more instinct, or more feeling driven, that you just have an urge, you are impelled to do what's right because it is what feels good, and it's just so obviously the thing, and then that leads us into it. The reason these loves are spiritual and heavenly is that loving acts of service and doing them because we love to. And this is where that unpacks a little more, because, okay, you can love doing nice things, but this gets into the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Isn't that what we're asking here? Are we doing the right things for the right reasons? Okay. And what's so important about those loving acts of service and doing them because we love to is divorced from any concern for our own image. I don't care. Sorry, other words. You're getting highlighted because this is such an important highlight. Our own image. That's such a good way to put it, NCE translation. We're doing that without thinking about how we look. And not just look like how you'd look in a mirror, but how we're perceived, our reputation, what this does for our advancement above and beyond the way other people are perceived. That's what really gets in there. That is, when we love acts of service spiritually, we're not focused on ourselves, but on others outside ourselves, others for whom we are doing something good. Love for ourselves and for the world are the opposite of these loves because they focus our attention on doing acts of service, not for the sake of others, but for our own sake. And I'm going to demonstrate this here now with something we've all been through, teaching people how to draw shapes. So let's say that somebody wanted to do, was like, I don't know how to draw a hexagon. And I was in the mode of this first one, doing stuff, loving it because I'm focused on others for whom we're doing something good. My thought process, as I'm doing it, is, oh yeah, well, hexagon, the first part goes up here, and then you got to have a connecting part here. And it would be easy if I explain it like this, go down here, and then I'll probably tell this person, okay, well then that's 6, and then you have to, that's 3, and then you do another one, and you do another one, and then you do one here, and you see how these go together, and this is going to be cool because this is really going to help them draw hexagons in the future. And then I'm done. So I'm not thinking about myself. Look at the contrast where, let's say somebody says, okay, I really don't know how to draw a triangle. And I say this, okay, well, I know a lot of people online are watching this show, so the first thing that's cool is they're going to see how good I am at drawing a triangle. But the other thing they're going to see is like, look at that, somebody asked him and he took time to help them out. That's really cool, man. And the person who asked me is really going to be in my debt because I show him such a cool triangle. So in the end, look who's the guy who can draw triangles and is known as the best triangle drawer in the world. So that's the difference. But is it always that comically black and white? How do we know? Because how do you create a complete filter from anything of self flowing in? Could it be that there's a twist coming up here? When we do this, meaning if we're drawing the triangle for our own sake, seriously, this hexagon for a second in there, I was like, am I drawing this right? When we do this, we are turning the divine design upside down, putting ourselves in the Lord's place and the world in heaven's place. That's very interesting because if we're saying we're drawing this triangle and the knock on the triangle is that we're really just doing it for ourselves, that would mean if who it's being done for is the Lord's place, that would mean when we're doing things that are good, they're meant to be serving the Lord. The Lord is the one to whom they're supposed to be giving credit because the Lord is, as we were just looking at in the previous News from Heaven episode, the Lord is a love of doing good to the entire human race. So anything that's being done that's good really should be pushing to achieve the Lord's goals, which is not to push different reputations up and down and different status up and down, but to give something useful to someone that will forward them working themselves with God's architecting into heaven. So the Lord is, think of the place that if we were selfish, the place we'd put ourselves in, swapping that out for the Lord. Okay, but I still don't feel like I know whether or not I'm being selfish, or isn't, what's up with these standards? They're a little too harsh. I think this was a waste of watching this episode. Wait, look at the clock. We're only halfway done. What else is still to come? I don't know. This means we are looking away from the Lord in heaven when we're doing the triangle, and looking away from them is looking toward hell. Because hell is just the absence of God in heaven. There is more about these loves, though, in 424 above. Go check it out. Go read it if you want to hear a little bit more. Okay, this highlighter is going to get a workout here. Still, preach it. We do not have the same kind of feeling and sense of love for doing what is useful for its own sake that we have for doing what is useful for our own sake. What he's saying is, we naturally like stuff that helps us. That's just what it is. Now, I think this story has been told on this channel before, but it's very poignant to what we're doing, so I have to tell it again. There was a time when my grandmother, I was a kid at the time, and I was having issues I did not want to share with my sister. And my grandmother tells me this story. I don't remember it. This could be a falsehood, but I don't think so. I don't think she has the motivation to fake me out about this. She was saying, look, doesn't it feel like I was having trouble sharing with my sister, but then the adults intervened and I had to share. And she said to me, doesn't it feel better when you're sharing with your sister? And I said to her, I've heard you say that, but I haven't noticed. Bam. Very bad kid. But very true. That it probably doesn't always feel better. And just in life, I know that, of course, when something goes well and I get a lot of credit for it, that feels good. Swedenborg is being very real with us. It's like, no, don't have the expectation that, the only way that I'm a spiritual person is if it makes me just as happy, that I don't care at all when things benefit me. Because we can be sitting here like, oh, I even did a good thing, but then and you can dissect it endlessly. Am I just doing it for myself? How do I make sure I'm doing it for... Now it's sort of both, but this is just fodder for the cloud. God is not interested in giving us a score from 0 to 100 on how selfless we are. And I don't think we're built to be able to pick it apart, but we still need some kind of measure. So how are we going to be able to wade through this? So Swedenborg just admitted that it's hard to not be pumped up with yourself and things that benefit you. That just seems like some people who aren't buying into the Swedenborg thing or have never heard it, which would be almost everyone, would just say, of course you act in self-interest. That's good. That's how it is. There's nothing better about not acting in self-interest. So how do we navigate through this? This also means that when we are doing something useful, we do not know whether we are doing it. Look at this. Wow. No, not 2 sentences in a row. This is the crux, though, of this episode. This also means that when we are doing something useful, we do not know whether we are doing it for our own sake. For its own sake, sorry. The highlighter's throwing me. For its own sake or for our own sake. How do I know if I'm being selfish? Is it the question we're asking, right? You don't. You don't. People are like, why do you even have the pen? Like, what's that adding to this? He's saying here, it's all right. You don't know when you're doing something. You can't just split hairs on what's really giving you gratification inside something, whether you're doing it for your own sake. Because there's all these shades of, you can love getting in an important position because you love the good you can do from that position versus you love just your reputation, honor, and gain you get in that position. So you don't. So here we go. We're not equipped to dissect this and know. So then what do? You just don't try to be good? How do you do it? And here's the surprising way in which Swedenborg says we can know if we're being selfish. We might know, though, that what we do is useful for its own sake to the extent that we abstain from evils, because to the extent that we do, the source of our acts of service is not ourselves, but the Lord. And what he's talking about there is not just in the moment, it's over all of life. But the more you have these ambiguous circumstances where I'm doing something good, am I in credit or not? Who knows? But overall in life, if we are trying to abstain from evils because we don't like them, that's how you can know in the big picture. Evil and good are opposites. So to the extent that we are not engaged in something evil, we are engaged in something good. No one can be in evil and in good at the same time, because no one can serve two masters at the same time. So don't beat yourself up and spend all this time saying, am I perfectly motivated in the good things that I do? Am I being selfish if I'm taking time for myself, or if I'm trying to do something with my name attached to it, all that? You don't know. What he's saying is what we're really supposed to do is I want to write obvious situations where there's evil. Like, this is stuff that's 10 Commandments-ish, the stealing, burning with hatred and revenge. The things that and everybody has different beliefs on what they think is good. Whatever you really believe, not that it's all relative, but there can be shades of gray, but pretty much we have positions where we come down in a lot of these, going based on what you believe. And I feel like I have to hedge it, because if you believe something that's actually really bad is good, that's a whole different situation. But those of us who are generally trying here, when it comes up, the stuff that I do know, that's not good. Like, this is I'm getting an impulse to do something really negative, or sabotage something, or whatever. Then if I say I don't want to do that because I know that causes harm, and even though it's offering me some kind of attraction to it, it would give me some kind of advantage or gain or pleasure or something. If I say, I don't want to do that thing, the fact that I'm doing that is the best way to know overall that I'm working towards, in the good things I do, not doing it for self-centered reasons. Because he's saying evil and good can't coexist. So if we know that let's say we've got these negative things out here, and we are working to put a barrier between us and them, to block them out, that's the best way to know, because that's the stuff that would feed whatever's evil in here. And because evil and good can't really coexist, the more we're starving our evil, the more this good is coming, and that will be, even in the involuntary stuff we can't measure inside us, that's what's going to be leading to the good things we do out in the world. That's the best way. Don't worry about micromanaging your motives in each good deed you do. Just push away the stuff that you know is wrong and work to do that. That is the bellwether for whether you're doing stuff for a good motive. Man, nobody would have saw that coming. I mention this because it helps to know that even though we may have no clear sense of whether we are doing acts of service for their own sake or for ours, either way, they're doing something good, but we just don't know. Do I have pure motivations or not? I don't know. Whether the acts are spiritual, that is, or merely earthly, we could tell by seeing whether we think evil deeds are sins or not. That you can just get a general litmus test on the condition of our mind. And if it's like, yeah, we don't like doing evil stuff, that's probably an indication that our good stuff is good. And everyone is, of course, working to try to not like evil stuff less and less. So just knowing that's where we can focus the energy. That's the project. It's like, oh, actually, how do you get the ceiling to stop having this drywall that's getting wet and falling apart? The actual way you do that is you go way up to the shingles on the roof, and you're fixing those up, rather than just keep patching the drywall inside. So we're going up to the place where, okay, more and more I can check how much is my mind liking evil stuff versus not, and how much am I pushing back? Because you all know you can have like, why can't I shake this thing? Are we doing anything voluntarily to try to make progress there, the part of us that we can control? Then, yeah, the acts of service will fall in line. The good stuff will fall in line. This is really why, all these 10 commandments are not like, do this good thing, do this good thing, do this good thing. Don't do this bad thing, don't do this bad thing, don't do this bad thing. These are the little part we can do. God brings in the good stuff. If we think they are sins and therefore do not do them, then our acts of service are spiritual. And once we begin abstaining from sins because they are distasteful to us, then we begin to have an actual sense of loving service for its own sake, because there is a spiritual pleasure in service. And I think you can get there gradually. There are certain things that I used to, certain evil stuff that I used to think was great, and now I definitely have a distaste for it. Other stuff is still fight to say, okay, yeah, right, I know I shouldn't do this isn't good. But some things I feel like I'm there. So we just make progress. The more we can get that, then this automatically, this doing good stuff for the right reasons, you'll start to feel the spiritual side in there. It could even be in there, but we don't feel it yet. I just find this to be a really cool, really pressure relieving and sentiment, and it makes it to me clear that this is not as I said, a scorecard. It's okay, I'm going to give you overall how good of a person are you. Well, you're a 57. This is very regimented, and you should have done better in this weird sort of way of making sure that the good things you do. Oh, it's okay to not know that. Let's work on the stuff we can obviously work on. To me, it sounds freeing. It sounds like it's news from heaven. And that's the news from heaven. Hope that I communicated that well. It's a tricky concept in some ways, but also like a very cool one. And I hope that you can take it out into your week. And let me know in the comments, have you tried applying that? Is that helpful? Is this any kind of relief for you? Because it's always useful for us to know what's working and what isn't. And like and subscribe if you didn't already. Hopefully this concept equips you further to not just do the work of life, but do it joyfully and without the overburdening of guilt and other sorts of things, because really we want to be clearing out that mind. We want to be doing it in a way that is fun to do while we do it. And I think that's got to be that my yoke is easy and my burden light that God is talking about. That this isn't going to be misery. It's work, but it's work with a purpose, and with that, the hidden joy in it. So I hope that you have a lot of joy this week. Talk to you later.